Now let's look at how to manage your Azure file shares from Windows, Linux, and macOS. You can connect to your Azure file share with Windows, including Windows Client and Windows Server. All this information is available by selecting Connect from your file share page in the Azure portal. For Windows, you need to ensure that port 445 is open. Azure Files uses SMB protocol. SMB communicates over TCP port 445. You need to ensure your firewall or your ISP provider is not blocking TCP port 445 from the client machine. Azure file shares can also be mounted in Linux distributions using the CIFS kernel client. This can be done on demand with a mount command or on boot to be persistent by creating an entry in etc/fs tab. You can mount file shares in Linux with SMB and NFS protocols. For macOS with High Sierra version 10.13 or later, there are two different ways to mount an Azure file share. You can use the Finder UI or using the terminal. macOS will use only SMB3 to mount a file share. Let's look at the advanced options for file shares. When you plan to create Azure file shares, you need to have a storage account and decide whether you want to create a large file share and or disable secure transfer. The maximum file share size that you can create is 100 TB for both standard and premium storage account. However, if you opt to use 100 TB with standard storage account, then you need to enable large file shares for Azure files at the time of the creation for the storage account under the Advanced tab. The secure transfer option is enabled by default, which is required to enhance the security of your storage account by only allowing requests to the storage account by a secure connection. For example, when calling REST APIs to access your storage accounts, you must connect using HTTPS. Any request using HTTP will be rejected when the secure transfer required is enabled. Please note that both options, secure transfer and large file shares, can be also changed after you create a storage account under Settings, the Configuration section. Let's start by creating an Azure file share and upload the file from the Azure portal. Once you created the storage account, you need to provide the file share name, quota, and access tiers. Access your storage account and then click File Shares. Click Add File Share and give your new file share a name. Set a quota and access tiers. Quota refers to the total size of files on the share, and the access tiers determines the price and, in some cases, also the performance of a file share. The main differentiation of these tiers is the cost for storage at rest and for the transaction. After your file share is created, you can upload a file. From the Upload blade, select your file and then click Upload. Notice the ability to add a directory, delete the share, change the access tier, and edit the quota. To create a file share with PowerShell, first you need to gather the storage account name and the storage account key. I will start first by setting the resource group name variable, the storage account name, and I will get my storage account resource using the get az storage account, and then I will get my storage account key and store them in a variable called storage account keys, and then I will get my storage account context and store them in a variable, and finally I will create a new file share using the new AZ storage share and the file share name called file-share-name-02. If I switch to the Azure portal and hit refresh, we can see that the new file share name gets created. Once you create a file share, you can mount it to access your files. Let's mount a file share with PowerShell from a Windows machine. It's important to remember that you need to run these commands from a regular and not an elevated PowerShell session to mount the Azure file share. I will start first by setting my variables such as the resource group name, the storage account name, and the existing file share name called marketing. Of course, you need to replace those variables with the proper information of your environment. These commands require you to be logged into your Azure account if you haven't already logged in. You can use connect-az account commandlet to log in. I will start first by setting my storage account name in a variable called storage account. Then I will get my storage account keys and store them in a variable. I will verify that my existing file share exists using the if statement. And then I will convert my storage account key and store it in a secure variable called passwords, and then set the credential variable. And finally, I will run the new ps drive commandlet followed by the drive letter Z drive, the PS provider file system root. As you can see, the marketing Z drive get mapped to my machine. And when finished, you can dismount the file share by running remove-ps drive command followed by the drive letter Z, and as you can see, the drive letter gets removed. Azure file shares are deployed into storage account, which are top-level objects that represent a shared pool of storage. This pool of storage can be used to deploy multiple file shares. There are therefore three categories to consider: storage accounts, standard and premium, Azure file shares, and files. For more information about Azure Files scalability and performance targets, please read the scalability guide by Microsoft. Now you are ready to manage Azure file shares for Azure Files.